I was aware I felt different. I wasn't aware that I was starting to use food to numb, medicate, deal with those difficult feelings. I knew there was a connection, but I hadn't really made the connection.
Food Addiction is a podcast which explores the disease of food addiction and presents the solution. We interview professionals and counselors who specialize in the disease of food addiction, and we interview individuals who have successfully recovered from food addiction and discuss how they did it. Esther Helga Goodman-Stotier was motivated to change careers after she recovered from food addiction by opening a food addiction treatment center and the InFact School, the world's first and only sugar and food addiction counseling training, which offers a recognized certification. Check out the website for more information on obtaining this certification, as well as proven recovery programs at infactschool.com. Listen to these episodes as we discuss the problem and the solution around food addiction. This is Food Addiction, the Problem and the Solution podcast. Today on the podcast, we host Raena Z, who is a guest and identifies as a recovered food addict. Welcome, Raena.
Good morning.
Good morning. Anxious to hear your story and how you, what it was like and how you recovered from food addiction. You and I talked on Zoom, and I know a bit about you. You were, I know, overweight much of your life, 100 pounds or more above your healthy body weight. And you had said your highest known weight was 315 pounds. You were a size 26 at one time. And you've been through inpatient treatment for food addiction. And so I know you identify as a food addict who is living in recovery. Is that right?
You betcha. Yeah, I sure am.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start by telling the listeners in the podcast, about your childhood, and then perhaps go on to the teenage and adult years as what your food use was like. Were you an overweight child?
In hindsight, I would say, on the larger side of average for most of my life. I believed I was an overweight child. But looking in photos now, it didn't start until, 8, 9 years old. I started to look significantly different, but as a baby, infant, sort of pre-8, I was fairly normal. So part of my story is that I had to rewrite a little bit of what I perceived was my story and what reality was.
Interesting. It's funny how memories are, that we remember things a certain way, and it turns out sometimes in denial or whatever. The story we tell ourselves isn't exactly the story. But talk about your childhood. Was there trauma, negative experience? What was your family like?
Yeah, so my family was fairly typical. 2 parents, my sibling and myself, living in a nice home, in a nice neighborhood. Not any significant trauma for the first 13 years. And then, and my story about food in relation to that time period was I liked excess food. I remember, being at my grandmother's house and discovering the candy jar and eating the peppermints that even burned more than, say, my sibling did or my cousins did, and eating more of those and liking it, even though they weren't that great tasting. But I remember having more than others did. I also remember discovering the boxes of chocolates that were around the house or around my grandparents' house, and eating underneath the layers and having shame, even at that age, to know that I didn't want to be discovered to have eaten more, and lifting up the layers and spreading them out, and things like that.
Yeah, I did that. It was later. I ate a lot of ice cream. I would have 2 bowls, and I would be shamed for eating more than 1 bowl of ice cream. But your house was not like mine, as I understand. In my home, as a child, we always had cakes, cookies, ice cream, candy, junk food. So it was easily accessible to me. But you said that you didn't have really junk food in your house, chips and cookies.
Yeah, my family didn't really. We didn't buy the sugary cereals. We didn't have pre-made boxed cookies. There was certainly foods, homemade foods, homemade cookies, homemade cakes. But, chips were a treat and were not regularly available. Those boxed items, those sugary commercial packaged items were not readily available. So I found, at a holiday, they were certainly around. And I remember my mom hiding them in various places around the house. And I quickly learned where her hiding places were. And again, did a lot of the maneuvering around layering and moving things. So they weren't detected.
So your secret was safe. Was she hiding them from you?
I'm not sure. Interesting. My weight was never discussed as a young person, even up until I was maybe in my 20s. It was never discussed. My mom would take me to, the stores to get larger size clothes when I was in my, early teens. It was just kind of what we did. But it was never criticized inside the home. I definitely felt bullied, teased outside the home. Absolutely. Terribly teased, but not inside my home. It was never mentioned. There was a bit of a diet culture in the home. My mom struggled a little bit. So she, the rest of my family ate on a larger size plate. My mom would eat on the salad plate. And so she had her own struggles, but she never gave that to me to have the smaller plate. But I definitely saw it happening. But it was never said to me, I should have less. I looked different. That I recall. It was not mentioned.
Yeah. In my notes, I have that your mom was worried about you, though.
She was worried in my older years because I started to get significantly larger in my teenage years. And then in my 20s, then it was discussed. I would discuss it with her, and it was discussed, but I was never shamed within my home. I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel supported, maybe because it wasn't mentioned. But it was just kind of one of those topics that was never brought up.
Yeah, I was. The interesting thing was I had this dichotomy of my mom buying all these things that caused me to gain weight that I ate and ate too much of, but I was criticized by her really kind of warning me that I had overweight relatives and that if I wasn't careful, I was going to look like them and be overweight. My dad used to tease me for being overweight. So I got that. Didn't stop me, but I did start diets pretty early at about 14 years old. So as a child, though, you were aware as a child that you were eating more than other kids.
Yes, and I was bullied at school outside the home quite significantly. So that would be part of the trauma. And my sibling did tease me. And
I got that too. Yeah, my sister was always tall and thin. I was short and not thin. But you, my notes tell me that you were 200 pounds in high school, which
I believe so.
Tough.
I believe so. So yeah. So then at 8-ish, it started to escalate, and then my parents began marital discord, back and forth between separation.
How old were you then?
At about 13, yeah.
13.
And it really started to escalate then. So through my high school years, definitely started to pack it on. My mom had been a stay-at-home mom. She went back to work. So I would come home after school and had lots of feelings of loneliness and being different. It's shocking, but none of my friends' parents were divorcing. It's strange to think with the divorce rates what they are, but I had major feelings of loneliness and being different. And that was a pretty painful time. And spent a lot of time after school making food because it wasn't really there. Making homemade French fries, using a deep fryer every day, lots of ketchup, lots of salt, and just sitting watching TV with
food,
with my food. Yeah.
I did the same thing. I came home from school and I ate fudge that somebody had made, and homemade fudge, and hash browns that I cooked in Crisco on the stove. And I was all by myself, and it was just like I could just, be in my own little world with nobody bothering me.
Yeah.
And just eat to feel better.
Yeah.
Were you aware at the time? I mean, I was relieving some emotional discomfort. The teenage years are tough anyway, just boredom, isolation, feeling different. Were you aware of the connection with that and eating then?
I was aware I felt different. I wasn't aware that I was starting to use food to numb, medicate, deal with those difficult feelings. I knew there was a connection, but I hadn't really made the connection.
Yeah, I hadn't either at the time. Now I look back and I see it. Yeah,
me too, for sure.
Now I look back, I see it and how I've used food all these years.
Mm-hmm.
So you had an experience in the cafeteria that I thought kind of really reflected shame around our size.
Yeah, I was I think in my last or second to last year of high school, and I was in the cafeteria finding clothes was to meet the trends was difficult at my size. I was shopping at plus size stores, which were really more geared towards middle-aged older ladies. Didn't quite meet the fashion, but I remember having these jeans, and they fit and they were cool-ish, and I wore them every day. I just wore them all the time, and I wore the thighs rubbed. I was very heavy-legged, and my thighs rubbed, and such that they actually ripped. And the whole inner thigh of my jeans ripped in the middle of the cafeteria, like extreme, like my whole leg is hanging out. And I just remember the shame and the humiliation.
Oh gosh.
And like hundreds of kids and like my peers and my friends laughing. And me just wanting to curl up and fade away. It was just horrid.
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, when you're overweight and you're walking on an airplane, and it's like people are looking at you like, I hope she doesn't sit next to me, or getting on rides. If you go to the fair or an amusement park, am I going to fit? Do I need a seatbelt extender? All those things.
All of those things. All of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the later years in your early adult 30s, 40s. You said that food became your friend, that you tried to embrace fat acceptance. I went through that too. You said you really didn't have health problems. You had some skin problems on your knees and stomach with the weight.
Yeah, I had some skin breakdown, with folds and things that it was difficult to keep dry. But other than that, I didn't have any significant notable health issues at the time. Now later over years, my hips aren't as great from having, carried so much weight for so long. But yeah, at the time I didn't really have anything, but I definitely knew I looked different. I felt different. I didn't like the way I looked, but ended up trying to, embrace the different, where do I fit? And well, I hadn't really addressed it as a me problem so much as, well, it's society's problem for not, for being biased and wanting me to fit in a cookie cutter. And, so I leaned into, fat acceptance, body acceptance, which I wanted so desperately to accept my body and like myself again. But it just, it didn't work. It didn't fit. And it didn't really feel like home.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great. I see women, particularly men, I guess too, but women, our society has a fat bias, weight bias for sure. We know that. And I've seen women, on television programs that are overweight and seem to be perfectly happy with their size or at peace with it. And I never got there. I was never happy, overweight. I just felt judged and shamed. And it's like, I kept doing diets. I'd be successful and then I'd gain it back. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. When did tell me about your weight? Like you were 200 in high school, 30s and 40s. What was your weight like?
Yeah, so it just gradually increased and increased and increased, and so then college, and I started trying various modalities to lose it. Could never stick with anything, and it just, I'd lose a tiny bit, gain some more. Lose a tiny bit, gain some more, just the progression. Yeah. And then I got married, and was able to, fit into a decent sized wedding dress, or, for me, it was decent size. And then after marriage, just it really escalated again. Got pregnant. And that was my first contact with a weight related health issue. So I had gestational diabetes. I had never been diabetic, but I had gestational diabetes. And so at that point, I saw a nutritionist and was on a diet controlled plan in order to not have to go on insulin. And I was able to stick to that. But it was for the baby, not for me. Yeah. And in the end, it got close that I might have to go on insulin, and I refused. And I remember them writing non-compliant on my chart. And I did not like that, because I also worked in healthcare. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to be that non-compliant person. But and then after our son was born, it really skyrocketed, And
where was your weight? Not to put a number on it. But
it was at I would say 315.
Wow.
Yeah. It was really high. Yeah.
And you were like me. You tried diets, right? I mean, you did I don't know if you did this in the 80s, but in the 80s, it was a big deal to do low fat. Turns out fat is good for us.
Right.
Yeah.
I did.
Low fat.
Yeah, I was
No
almost
fat. No fat diet.
no fat at
Right, which is
all.
not healthy for your body. Your body
No,
needs fat,
no. But
and
but
it's good for it.
that was my most quote unquote successful venture. I was able to release 50 pounds doing that. I should say lost, because I did certainly take it back. But there was a lot of willpower, discomfort. Yeah. That was sort of my largest loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine. I was usually anywhere from 50 to 70 pounds overweight, and I would routinely lose 45, 50 pounds, get down to a size 8, size 6, and feel good. Got a lot of compliments. I looked great in my clothes, and then eventually I went back to the food. I mean, diets don't work long term for food addicts.
That is correct.
We know that. But it took me a long time to realize that.
Yeah.
Did you ever have issues with alcohol addiction?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I tried to smoke. I tried to, I was trying to fit in, in my 20s. I tried different things. They never stuck, but food was it.
Yeah.
Food
was your thing.
It.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a recovered alcoholic too, and I used food to get sober, which worked, and then I had to hit the food. So that was my journey.
The only alcohol I really liked was the sugary, fatty drinks.
Like the big the chocolate martinis and whatnot.
That's right. But I was in it for the
sugar,
and the fat, not the alcohol.
Not the alcohol.
Yeah.
It sounds like age 13 or so was pretty pivotal for you and quite a transition. It sounds like your mom got divorced, and then your stepfather, you said, was an alcoholic, and you grew up with him the remainder of your childhood years, right? He was an alcoholic?
Yeah, he didn't. So my parents were back and forth between about 13 and 20. And so then she remarried into my 20s. So
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't grow up with him.
I didn't know him, but not. He was not in a parental role with me. But yes, she did marry him, and he was an alcoholic, and he died of his disease.
Alcoholic death. Yeah.
He sure did.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were exposed to that it sounds like not when you were growing up, but you saw it.
I did. And I saw the lethality of addiction. That was my first real exposure to the lethality of addiction.
Yeah, it will kill us, right? If we don't stop, alcohol or food. Sometimes there's slower deaths than others. But when we're in the food, I was like this. We become so focused on ourselves. There's a lot of selfishness, self-absorbed behaviors. I have to get my food, or I'm not going to be okay. I have to go through the drive-through, get this food, so I can get rid of this anxiety or whatever it is, anger, fear. How did that work in your life with the excess food?
Yeah, I remember being fixated, driven, and going to many lengths in order to get my fix. Multiple drive-throughs. Had to go to this drive-through to get that thing, and then that drive-through to get that thing, and it was like, pardon my term, but like a buffet. When I had I had a job, I had income, I had mobility. I could go anywhere and get whatever I wanted, and I did. And I would drive many lengths in order to get this great thing or that great thing, and travel to even when traveling, like, oh, there's this great restaurant and that great thing that I've never had before, and got to get that. Did go to many lengths in order to get my fix. I would order 2 drinks at the drive-through for me and my imaginary friend, because I was ordering 2 meals plus worth of food, and I didn't want them to know, or didn't think they would know, for, me and my friend. But I was ordering that kind of volume as well.
Yeah. Drive-throughs serve as a secrecy and keep food addicts. I use drive-throughs a lot. I would go to a Burger King, get like the big meal, and just eat it in the car with one of those milkshakes, or stop at a convenience store to get gas when I was traveling, and then just raid the cheese crackers and the Reese cups or whatever, and then hide the wrappers. Right? That's what we do.
Masterful wrapper hider.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we could probably talk about techniques, kind of like, okay, stick them in this part of the car, nobody will see them, or find the nearest trash can before you reach your destination. But there's a lot of secrecy and shame to, hide this food addiction. But as we say, we wear this addiction.
Yes.
We're not getting away with a secret, right? You don't have to be overweight to be a food addict necessarily, but you share this with me. I was obese and have maintained this 70-pound weight release for 7 years, just in recovery. So we're going to talk about recovery. I think it's interesting that your career was one of being a psychiatric nurse, which is an interesting profession for a recovering food addict. How do you think that worked as a food addict? Did you understand food behavior, compulsivities, and addictions from a psychological connection?
Well, I wanted to. I wanted to. I always had an interest in healthcare. I remember wanting to be a nurse, even as a little girl. Then my focus kind of shifted. Always in a helper kind of profession. I was going to be a special ed teacher in my teenage years and up until my first year of college. And then I switched, and because I hadn't even heard about psychiatric nursing, but I was always an inquisitive person, always trying to figure out why. My mom called me like the why kid. I always had a question of why. And so I thought, maybe there would be, an answer to my why. In my helping profession, we studied, we didn't study disordered eating or food addiction. We certainly studied other forms of addiction and other mental illnesses and other mental health solutions. It wasn't really touched on then, but certainly that was a part of a driver to figure out who I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't help.
No, the why is the booby prize. Okay. We know that now.
That's right.
I mean, when I first got into recovery for alcoholism, I brought all these books that my, person that I was working with told me to get. I just wanted to game it. Like, okay, let me figure this. I can figure this out. Take the final. I'll be out of here. I don't know why you're still in here after 30 years, but I will game it, take the final, and be out of here, and then I'll be fixed. But that is not how this works. But we realize as food addicts that we have, in retrospect, okay, this is me. And maybe you'll relate to this, we have become physically addicted to sugars and foods and perhaps flour, ultra-processed foods. I was addicted to chips and salsa, pizza, Mexican food. I often ate after a long day of work when I was tired. To wake myself up, I would eat in the middle of the night to put myself back to sleep. So it's a physical addiction. But then there are behavioral addictions around food. We can eat for emotional reasons, to self-soothe, to deal with anger and fear, help us deal with relationships that are not working, stress, spouses, jobs, children. So what would you say the physical addiction, the cravings, and then the food behaviors are addictive? I'm sure you
Yeah, I
can relate to
definitely
what I'm talking
relate. I
about.
definitely relate. Yeah. So my go-tos were donuts, chips, deep fried food, cookies. Those were my
Yeah.
go-tos.
Yeah.
Certainly, I didn't discriminate.
Yeah.
Cheesecake, anyway,
Yeah.
I could go on. I certainly didn't discriminate, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I definitely and volume. Though I would, my friends in my 20s would say, we'd talk about weight as, between
Yep.
girlfriends, and they'd try and be helpful, and they'd be like, yeah, but you don't eat very much. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, no, I don't. In front of you, I didn't say,
Right.
But volume was definitely part of my story, and
Mm-hmm.
and volume in hiding and secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
So volume, sugar, flour, fat, combinations of those things, and I had a real thing with sweet and salty mixed
Yes.
together. That was
Yeah.
that was probably the best hit,
Yeah.
and food behaviors, yeah, secrecy, hiding, drive-throughs, cars, and
Did you eat alone? I mean, like out at a restaurant? Would you go to a restaurant and eat alone?
no,
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 I did
no,
that.
no,
Yeah.
no. I would bring it home. I would
Bring it home.
drive through and bring it home. Drive through and
Yeah.
bring it home, or shop and bring it home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my car was a mess. Crumbs
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah. And ate to I don't know if I remember even why and when and how. It's just what I did.
Yeah.
I don't remember feeling a lot. I actually don't remember a lot.
Yeah.
So which
Yeah.
tells me I was actually numb. I do remember eating to the point of feeling like comatose and like eating myself to sleep in the middle of the day, and being like, how did I fall asleep here? Like, I shouldn't be tired, but like eating to the point of sedation.
Yeah, it's a food fog that you get in, and it's just like your brain. It's just like this sleepy feeling. I remember that. Well, Esther Helga Goodman-Stotier, who owns the podcast, likes to host guests that have been through food addiction treatment on the podcast, and you have been through Shift, Recovery by Acorn, one of our sponsors, and the website is foodaddiction.com. You went November 2017. You went to treatment in Vancouver, Canada.
Correct. Yeah, I went. Okay. I went to. I had tried a bunch of things. I joined 12-step recovery for about 4 years. Had some relief, but something was still missing. And in March of 2017, I heard from someone who was on a weighed and measured food plan, which I was like, I am not going to do that. Then I saw and heard something in her that changed my life. And so I tried to do that with her support on my own. And then I had been abstaining from those categories that I mentioned: chips, donuts, deep fried foods, and cookies for 4 years. But I was eating a Danish because it didn't have a hole in the middle. Anyway, but I was eating Danishes, but not donuts. And I hadn't had chips, which really were, my number, chips and donuts, number 1 and number 2 for me. And so I tried to do the weight and measure on my own, or with another person's support, and then I ended up picking up chips, which scared the living daylights out of me. And so it was suggested that I seek inpatient treatment, which I did November 11th, 2017, and that has changed my life. That has changed my life.
Yeah, I relate to what you're saying here. I did not go through recovery. I did go through shift in May of 2019 with Amanda Leith and Phil Wardell, who's since passed September of last year. And he was a wonderful advocate for food addiction. We know he's just a pioneer. But the things that go on in shift, Phil talks a lot about powerlessness and denial. Those are two big themes. Phil talked about these. I'm sure Amanda does now. And that is, powerlessness. Can you stop when you start? Can you stop from starting? And if there's something going on where you cannot stop, there is a physical addiction, and there could be a behavioral addiction there too. So talk about powerlessness and denial, and then we'll talk about your experience at Shift.
Yeah, I had some idea about powerlessness before that. I had an idea. I had heard about it. It didn't really land with me until I had that level of desperation and real.
Do you think it was the bottom?
Sinking in. Yeah.
Bottom where you no other options is kind of where I got to the point.
No other options, and I had a willingness to do something differently. And because what I thought, what I said, what I read, what I did just was not working. And so, I was blessed to know Phil as well. Phil and Amanda were there, and I participated fully. I was terrified, but I was willing. I was gifted with that. And I just even feel a real sense of remembering the surrender.
Yeah. It's hard for people that are, I'm pretty strong-willed, and I don't like to be told what to do. But I had to be told what to do, to be like the person you were talking about that you saw had experienced recovery. It's kind of like, I'll do what she's doing because I have no other options. I'm going to kill myself if I don't.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I was killing myself.
Yeah. Slowly. It's a slow death sometimes, but we'll talk about, denial. We can talk about denial, and I'd like to hear about the revelations you had at Shift. But denial, it's just like what you talked about. The Danish didn't have a hole in it, so it's like it's a free jail free card. I was in. I dieted for 43 years, and somebody said you might want to try 12-step recovery, and I said I don't think I'm that bad.
Yeah,
And I was that bad, but I didn't want to believe that I was. That I just hadn't found the right diet.
Yeah, Yeah, I recognized I had a problem with food in the 12-step recovery rooms. I didn't realize I was an addict.
Yeah.
Until I got to and what the meaning of that was, and I sure had a lot of stigma about what that was, even with the profession that I had, and I worked with lots of people. I was working in addictions by then. And I really did not want to admit I was an addict, but I had a felt sense of this is what my relationship with food is. I cannot stop. Even no amount of willingness, want, will, abstaining on my own, white knuckling, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so that's when I recognized to my bones that I have a disease of addiction. And so that's, I think, when the denial started to really resonate, sink in, and I crumbled to a place where I was willing.
It's a shame that there is such a stigma associated with addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, behavior addictions. Because the society kind of like, oh, you're a loser. You can't control your food. You can't control how much you drink. You're some kind of a loser because you're an addict.
Pull up
and
your
it's a
bootstraps
physical.
and just figure it out.
Yeah, just like, and I did that for a long time. I tried,
That's right.
I tried. I could not do it on my own. I needed a recovery program. And, but that is what society, says to us, that, you aren't working hard enough, or you just need to exercise more or eat less. And yeah, I know.
Yeah.
My husband said, you just need to eat in moderation. Why can't you eat in moderation? I said, I have no idea what moderation is.
Right. Yeah.
I just know I want to keep eating. And I was a volume eater too. I would just pile a plate, eat it all, eat it fast, so I wouldn't get full too fast, so I could eat it all, those kind of things. Tell me about shift. Did you do emotional work there? Did you, what did you realize there? I mean, we know that sort of the abstinence from sugar, volume, we weigh and measure food. What did you realize at shift that maybe you didn't realize when you went in?
Yeah, I certainly learned how to weigh and measure my food, what foods were not causing that chemical reaction for me. So I learned about that, and emotional work was absolutely part of it. Really unblocking some core beliefs that I had about myself, saying, some secrets that I had been holding on to for a long time, and those were laden with shame. And so to speak those and to out those started the process of releasing the shame and the freedom there. So has and does continue to be shift level of support part of my recovery.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, some of the stuff that goes on there, and the secrets keep us sick,
Yes.
and when you say them, you realize that people don't judge you for your secrets, and that it's a safe environment. And
I'm
so
not alone.
Emotional.
I'm not alone. So much.
Like, oh, you did this too,
Yes, because so much of that is isolating for me, well, I think for all of us, and it just, that aloneness, that isolation just keeps me apart and keeps me sick. So sharing, being witness to others, working those, shift events in togetherness with other people is really important for me.
Yeah. Well, you got the click. It sounds like at shift. You surrendered that you couldn't do this on your own, and you became abstinent. You do what I do. You weigh and measure your meals. No sugar. You don't eat flour, and you work a 12-step program. So talk about your recovery and what the journey's been like since 2017.
Yeah. So I attend shift events regularly, annually, as much as I can, and that has absolutely been part of that. Being in the 12-step rooms, getting the support on a daily basis keeps me connected. I have quite a strong spiritual connection that is part of my story.
Yeah, me too. I couldn't do it on my own. I don't know what that spiritual part is, but I have faith in it. I do, and it sounds like you do too. So
very much.
How have you used? We know that I used to think if I diet and get down to a good weight, my life will be good. I'll have no problems. Turns out the problems continue, and life comes at us: relationships, fears, anger, challenges. So how do you deal with those things and not use food, not go get a Danish?
Yeah. Life is lifey.
Yes, it is.
I use my recovery tools. I have outside support. I try to not get too far ahead of myself. I try to stay in the moment.
Yes.
I commune with fellows. I live a recovered life. And the more I do that, the more obstacles I go through, though it's no protection against that, but I do develop some resiliency, and knowing that I've handled some tough things in recovery. And I can do those things if I keep following my recovery prescription.
I want to mention that the InFact School website, infactschool.com, has various 12-step programs listed there. So if you're interested in those, you can go there. Raena, you had said that when you lost weight, you had to figure out who you were now. Who you are now. What does that mean to you?
I think really getting to know who I was without. I lived so long trying to fit in to various groups, categories. I was looking outside to find me instead of inside to find me. And to learn what I liked, to learn what did it for me, where I felt joy, what worked for me, who I was, who I wanted to be. And it's been a interesting journey, but boy, I just have such gratitude for being comfortable in my own skin for the last few years of my life. And not having to pretend anymore.
Yeah. You're abstinent now. Are you at a healthy body weight, I assume, your maintenance weight?
It's part of my struggle. I have released 100 pounds. I have some other health issues that complicate what the number on the scale is. But I continue to work with professionals regarding that, but I am at peace with food.
Yeah.
I'm at peace with food. I am at peace for the most part in my mind and in my heart. And for me, that is the miracle, and that is the recovered life. So I am able to, I don't know what the number is for me, but I am able to run if I want to run. I'm able to be upside down and kiss the Blarney Stone. I'm able to zip line. I'm able to fly without asking for a seatbelt extender. I'm able to get on a ride. I'm able to do everything and anything that I want to do. And I do those things. Yeah. So it's not that I can, it's that I want to. Yeah. And I do.
Yeah. It's a beautiful life. I mean, I have neutrality from food, sugar, and other trigger foods. It sounds like you do too.
Yeah.
Part of the work at Shift is they want you to list all the foods you've ever binged on, and I stopped at about 35. I don't know how many you had. But
quite a number.
I binged on a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's freedom. I play basketball and soccer with my grandsons now. I hike the Grand Canyon and on a hiking tour. I play golf a few times a week. I mean, and I can do that because I'm physically recovered. But when I go to a birthday party, I don't need to eat cake. It's beautiful. I watch other people eat cake. I'm neutral to it, as neutral as I can be, but I don't take that for granted. And I'm sure you don't either.
I share that also. Yeah, I'm able to travel. We travel a lot around the world and just experience life, live life versus existing. And and I can do that with the supports that I have, and I'm so grateful. I know earlier I mentioned, I didn't want to be an addict, and now I'm grateful I am an addict.
Yeah,
and that for me is also the shift. That I'm grateful I get to live this recovered life. I get to be free. I get to help others. I get to look at hard stuff, and it is not pretty sometimes.
I know.
But I'm willing, and I had an experience even just this past weekend where I had an idea about how something should be, and I was unwilling to see it another way, but it was causing me significant distress. And it was proposed to me to think about it differently. And I was able to have a felt sense of what the truth was about it. And it was painful, but that helps me grow. Yeah. It helps me grow. And then I can, instead of constantly fighting and pushing and pulling, to just get really down to brass tacks and understand what is really going on. My recovery teaches me that. Mm-hmm. And then I have freedom.
Yeah, freedom. I mean, the freedom is in the recovery, and we can take our scales with us. We can eat healthy food just about anywhere, take food with us. So this is how we live, and this is the action that we take. And, I just had to be humble and willing to look at, myself. And they say you can't know yourself by yourself. You need other people to show you who you are. And they do. And I don't resist like, yes, but, I'm like this, yes, but, I need to listen to them and see if there's something I should change based on, what I'm resisting or fears, Well, we have a final sort of a signature question on the podcast as we wrap up here. What message would you give to someone who's out there that may weigh 315 pounds, 275 pounds, that has tried all diets, maybe has tried gastric bypass or Ozempic, and they just can't seem to stop eating once they start? The still suffering, food addict, compulsive overeater. What would you say to that person that might be listening?
That's a good question. I would just say that there's hope and possibility and trust to try something different. The definition of insanity is banging my head against the wall and, doing the same thing and expecting something different. And so I was so stubborn too, boy. I was willing to do something differently, and it worked.
Yeah.
And it's working.
It's working. Yeah. It's
working. And so, dip your toe out and maybe it's not for you, but what I was doing wasn't working.
Yeah. Boy, we tried too, didn't we?
We sure did.
I was stubborn too. Just like,
we sure
why
did.
Can't I do this? I just haven't found the right diet,
And there is freedom. There is absolute freedom.
Yeah.
It's a life that I had never imagined, and I am grateful. And I'm grateful to have the clarity.
Yeah. You weighed 315 at one time. I weighed 203. I'm only about 5'3", and so, this is it for me. It's recovery, and there are programs there we talked about. So, Raena, thanks for joining the podcast today as a guest. I'm so delighted. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to share.
This is the Food Addiction Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and learned more about this disease. We hope you will rate and write a review on this podcast and share it with others. If you or someone you know is suffering from the disease of food addiction, there is a solution. The various food addiction recovery programs are available and listed on the website, theinfactschool.com. Or if you would like to know more about how to get certified in treating food addiction, the school is accepting applications now for its next training beginning in September 2023. Go to theinfactschool.com. That's INFACT school.com to learn more.